So we're on top of the Maya Pyramid of Becan. It's an ancient Maya city in the middle of the jungles of Campeche. Earliest estimates are about 550 BC were the first inhabitants to live here, and it wouldn't reach its height for another 1,000 years. And even beyond that, people lived here for another 600 years. This pyramid and the pyramids surrounding here have some of the greatest architectural art styles found anywhere throughout the ancient Maya world. This is one of the greatest spectacles of the Rio Bec art style. Incredibly intricate architecture. Incredibly fine stonework on the casing stones. Look at these casing stones. Some of the finest stonework you see anywhere in the ancient world. On the exteriors of the temples, it would have been painted a bright red with cinnabar. This would have been an immaculate place to be from. What we're standing in right now is very likely the king's courtyard. If you look up here, perhaps right there is a better example. These inner chambers right here have vaulted ceilings, so they would have arched over. It's the same thing over here on this side. But there's no evidence that I can see that the squared off area that we're standing in right now ever had a ceiling. So I'm guessing that this was like an Acropolis garden courtyard in the middle. But over here I'll show you, just like we've seen before, very likely the king's chamber. Come on. So we got a bench, you know, perhaps food would have been made over here, perhaps there would have been a shrine. Up here would have been the king's bed, potentially. He would have had an incredible view of his city. He would have been able to see pyramids all the way around. All of this jungle foliage would have been cleared out. And down here, in the corner of his room. Also, another thing I should point out, notice the trapezoidal pyramids, or the trapezoidal doorways, how the walls lean in on each other. This is something that we see in ancient Peru at the ancient Inca sites. Perhaps evidence that there were merchants coming back and forth between Mesoamerica and South America, trading ideas with each other. It's not commonly accepted that that was happening, but we see little hints of that all throughout the Maya and the Inca world. But the king would have been able to stand up here and address his subjects from above. If you look off into the distance, you can see a pyramid rising just over the canopy. Right now we're going to head inside the chamber that I first saw when we arrived. Most likely, this area would have been potentially just a homestead or a room to avoid the heat and the humidity, but also this seems symbolic. When you walk in here, it does seem ritualistic. So, definitely a bed or a bench here of some kind. People were certainly coming in here to avoid the heat. These walls, if you show right here, 3.5 feet thick, insulates it, helps keep all of the heat out. It's very hot and humid here right now. As soon as we walk in, I can feel that cool air coming through. This is the opening to the chamber we saw. Insanely tall, insanely detailed architecture here. The Rio Bec style is unlike anything seen in the Maya world. The murals are encoded into the walls. The pyramids themselves are scaling almost straight up. It's like having to climb up a pyramid rather than just walk up the steps. I think almost certainly these inner chambers are meant for a ritualistic purpose. Not always do I buy the story that they made these walls so thick and made these dark tunneling labyrinths to resemble Xibalba, the Maya underworld, or to be symbolic of caves. You know, these were scientific people who were very intelligent, and of course when they went inside caves, they knew that big, thick, insulated walls that caves have, of course, provide a cool, cold, damp area to escape the heat. However, here, it's very obvious that rituals are being performed here. I think that, look at this right here on the ground. There are still Maya people here today coming and performing rituals. Probably the bone of a small bird of some kind being sacrificed here. This is 100% evidence that Maya rituals, sacrifices, are still being performed today. Look at all of these bones. Wow. People have been performing sacrificial rituals to the god Chak or Kukulkan in this city for 2,500 years. I can't believe we found these. This is still happening today. Wow. All right, let's continue. So, a royal priest or anybody in the royal family would have ascended out of Xibalba and been in their grand garden. This is amazing. Next thing, I want to take you guys down and show you where all of the high priests, potentially the lords, serving the king living up here would have lived. To do that, we've got to go back down the pyramid's staircases. So, one of the things I was noticing when we were walking down these steps is look at how perfectly, almost symmetrical and uniform all of the blocks are. A lot of times in the Maya world, the jungle grows so densely over the ruins that, like I've said so many times, the roots grow into the blocks and they rip the blocks apart. And many times they end up looking like this out here, where the casing stones have been pulled apart by the jungle foliage and all you see is the mortar and rubble beneath. But look at this right here. A lot of times the Maya don't get credit because they didn't move megaliths or they didn't usually move big blocks. Well, a lot of times that is a misconception because a lot of the big blocks have been torn apart and they're laying scattered around in the jungle. And over the last several hundred years, Spanish communities come in and they quarry the blocks because they're already carved, quarry the blocks and use them in their cities. But here we see some perfectly preserved blocks. Look at the stone masonry here. This would have all been an extremely vibrant red painted with cinnabar. So this entire pyramid that you're seeing would have been gleaming red with accents of green and blue. We might be able to see some of the red right here. I'm not sure if it shows up on camera, but it could be barely popping through. Let's walk over to this side. Look at this. Excellent stone masonry going down. Huge blocks on the casing stones. But over time, very likely, when this site was rediscovered by explorers around the turn of the century, there were probably trees growing all the way up on top of the pyramid. It could have looked like a huge mountain. It becomes excavated, the casing stones have been ripped off. I mean, these pyramids have probably been excavated, quarried, and then the foliage has grown over them multiple times in its history. Look at these steep staircases. Look at the stone mason work for every step. This may have just been a symbolic staircase for, design work. But it's the Rio Bec art style is something beyond anywhere that I have personally seen in the Maya world. Look at that. That's just a remnant of how bright red these would have been. It's a bit darker than it likely would have been in its day, but this entire pyramid would have been a gleaming red. Imagine when the sun is setting and it's shining on the pyramid, it would have gone from a bright red during the day to this dark, burnt red. You would have had incense and pots sitting up on top of the pyramid, fires lit. It would have been an amazing place to see. Look at these nooks back there. This could be evidence of multi-stage construction. Perhaps This right here was the front of the pyramid at one time. Staircases coming down, another part of the building added on. Check this out. So a lot of times when you're at Maya pyramids, or when you're at Maya sites, what a lot of people see are just the pyramids standing like this. But look at the flat ground that we're on. This right here, this whole city, the main plaza of the city is standing on a pyramid. Evidence of right here. This isn't a modern staircase. This is an ancient staircase. This entire city, all 4 pyramids in the main part of this plaza are standing on top of a larger pyramid platform. If this was taken into consideration, many of the Maya sites are some of the biggest pyramids anywhere in the entire world, sometimes by far. So coming up here on the back side of Becan, you can swing over here and show the rest of the pyramid. That's the pyramid that we were just on top of. And on the back side of the pyramid is very likely the housing for all the high priests and lords and maybe the extended royal family. So we'll start over here and we'll go that way. So a lot of the interiors of the buildings, it's not dissimilar to things that we've seen before, but in the Riobec art style, or the architectural style, we have these murals. These are intricate murals that we really don't see as much of, or as much of a prominence of, in many other ancient Maya sites. So in here, this would have been the place of a royal family of some kind, or a high priest or lord. You'd have beds on this side, you'd have a cache potentially for an offering or for storage. Potentially under here you'd have something as well. There's something living down there. Over here you'd have another bed, another cache. And then coming up here, you probably have the patriarch and the matriarch of the family with their giant bed here. And a cache, potentially for storage or for offerings as well. We'll come over here. A lot of it is much as the same, or a lot of it is much of the same. In here we see almost the same thing, but we don't see any beds. Could this be indicative of this being that same family's storage area, or was this just a home with no beds at all? A lot of these things we can't necessarily prove. Right here, you can show this. You can see the rounded corners on the end. This is pretty unique to this area of the Maya world. Definitely was showing the extremely skilled stonemasons that once lived here. One thing that I love about the Riobec art style, architectural style, is all of these ruins have little nooks and crannies. It's not uniform across any site. It's never the same. This is surely indicative of there being some kind of ancient blueprints, ancient, perhaps an architectural guild or an architect's guild. Every site is a little bit different than the other. And this site, above all, I think might be the most complex that I've seen in person thus far. From here we have a triad of chambers. Probably the chambers of the high priest. He would have had the holy family or the royal family living atop the pyramid. Over here on this side we see murals of ancient Maya deities. Very well preserved. This is the precipice of ancient Riobec art style. It's only seen mostly, for the most part, in this area of Campeche. But we see the inspiration of it in other Puka region sites as well. But this would have been the inner chamber of some kind of Maya lord, likely a high priest. You can see, very well preserved is that bright red cinnabar paint that would have coated the entire structure here. Look at the size of these blocks used on the corners. This would have all been stone roofing as well. But over time, very likely at one point in time, this structure was covered over by the jungle. Trees grow down inside the chambers, rip the blocks apart, and the roofs fall through. And then when it's all excavated, the rubble is taken out. Very likely up on top as well, there was another chamber with an outer wall and a roof on top of it as well. And all of that came crashing down at one point in antiquity after the fall of the Maya. So headed up into another residential chamber here. We see another bench or a bed. And then right here we see, these could be benches or beds. They could just be decorated staircases. We see a wheel. We see these trapezoidal upside down triangles angling down. See more Rio Bec designs here. And then extending further into a chamber. If you guys are ever in Campeche, Rio Bec, Maya area, you have to come check out Becan. This is probably some of the most detailed, most intricate ancient temples that I have ever seen anywhere in the Maya world. But anyways, I'm Luke Caverns. I'm an anthropologist that specializes in the study of early ancient civilizations. If you like videos like this, please like and subscribe for more, as that's really all you have to do to help me keep making these videos. Thank you.